Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York-based musician, composer, bandleader, and teacher Avram Fefer. We caught up with him in early May 2020 during the coronavirus quarantine to talk about this new world with no live jazz. He has recorded 13 albums as a leader, many more as a sideman, and has performed in clubs and festivals throughout Europe, Japan, Africa, and the Middle East with legends like Archie Shepp, Bobby Few, The Last Poets, and the David Murray Big Band. He's got a great story, so dig.
So I guess I should start off here. Obviously, this is quite an extraordinary time on the planet. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing creatively to kind of fill the void right now with what's going on.
Well, I mean, it takes a few different, the first thing I would say is, I've gone through a lot of, different moments. It's been kind of a cycle. There's the immediate reaction, and then there's kind of things go in waves over time. The immediate thing was, on a personal level, just kind of, first of all, I have asthma, so, my wife wanted me to be kind of careful. She's basically holding me prisoner, to not take too many kind of chances and all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, so the immediate thing, is things were coming along. I guess for me, one of the things that was hard was, the immediate thing is just the gigs you lose right off the bat, and kind of my immediate reaction, if you're speaking like creatively, I guess, the first thing is to kind of cover your bases financially, try to switch like some of my private teaching over to online so I could do that. And then I started exploring, pretty quickly. Lately I've been really going back to some stuff, like going back to some piano stuff that I hadn't worked on in a long time. Then I started working on my bass clarinet chops, playing some Bach exercises, playing the cello suites on bass clarinet. I started taking out some old, a lot of the times I'm working on my own music on all my woodwinds, and I started working on something I haven't done, which is work on old method books, things like Eddie Harris stuff that I found that was very challenging. And then recently got back into a bunch of monk compositions and been checking out all sorts of stuff with versions of monk tunes and voicings. And it's always, one thing that's such a blessing as a musician in it for the long haul is the way stuff appears to you the first time you work on it, and then you come back to it 10 years later, and then 10 years after that, and you have this vantage point that changes. And so it's so interesting when I start working on an Ornette tune that I haven't played in a long time, or a monk tune, and you realize, oh my God, my ears are in a completely different place than they were a few years ago. So it's fun. You get this kind of, it's like a little marker for how things, you get so busy you don't really notice this stuff. You're just busy doing gigs and practicing and teaching and stuff, and then you get a moment where you're really reflective and quarantined, and you see like, oh man, all this stuff has really evolved over the years. I hear some of these things very differently than I used to. So yeah, and I've been really going back to basics, some fundamentals, in terms of my practice routine, and getting back to some long tones that I hadn't been doing for a while, and the real basics as far as my practice goes. And then the business side of things, that's a whole other story that, separate from the creative endeavors. So.
Yeah, that's really what's probably the worst part of everything that's happening right now. So in light of that, what can the fans do to really help support you and the business side of things?
Well, that's a tough call. Everybody comes at this from a different vantage point. In a way, we're all in this microeconomy as creative musicians, but within that, we're all existing in different places. So, for example, in a strange way, for example, the guys who were on guys that I've recorded with a lot, Eric Rivas and Chad Taylor as a rhythm section, they tour almost constantly as sidemen with various groups. And so, they took a huge hit as far as traveling and work goes. So I'm sure they're probably applying for hopefully some of the unemployment stuff and things to cover a lot of the traveling. So that's what a lot of people are faced with doing right now. And then beyond that, I would say for fans, certainly for me, the main thing these days is to have more people, either buying my albums. I recently updated my Bandcamp page, so avramfefer.bandcamp.com, or something like that. Anyway, my Bandcamp page, with a number of the available recording output over the last 20 years. And so there's a lot of material there that people are buying now that is a lot better than the streaming services like Spotify and things like that. So people can actually buy digital albums or physical copies of any number of things. All my recordings with Bobby Few, trio records with Eric and Chad, my latest album with Mark Rebo and Chad and Eric. So there's, to me, that's the best thing people can do. I think also subscribing to your YouTube page, because that gets monetized at a certain point. Unfortunately, a lot of the online stuff is a lot of nickel and dime stuff, and, doesn't come close to comparing to, selling product on tour and what we get paid at the major jazz festivals. So it's a huge loss, and there's not a lot that fans can do other than, like I said, buy your stuff on Bandcamp, stay in touch with you, show support. Sometimes just the social support of, writing, posting your links on their Facebook pages to other people, talking about your music, talking about your compositions, your playing. And then once things open up, get everybody to, come out and see live shows under hopefully safe conditions. And, I hope that will be, not too long, but, we really hope that. The funny thing is with the music scene, as we all know, is that things have been in transition for years now. And so, first it was, things changing from albums to CDs, and then it's from CDs to digital, and then it's to streaming, and then it's, now LPs are coming back a little bit, but now, there's no live shows. And so, the impact as far as record labels and artists, this has been a constant transition and a challenge for our adaptability for professional musicians, especially creative musicians, to eke out a living now for a while. And people have had to tour more and more. And some people love that and other people don't. Kind of depends where you're at. That's basically it. And then, of course, for me, I teach also online private lessons. So anybody who's remotely interested in learning about improvising or composing or woodwinds or anything like that, piano, they can contact me. But otherwise, I don't think it's that easy for fans beyond, like I said, buying things on Bandcamp, because that supports the artist the best. Certainly listening on Spotify and stuff like that doesn't do a whole lot as far as I can.
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, the one thing about the jazz musician is that they're always so resilient. They're not in it for the money, and there's not a lot of talk of the possibility of innovation. And I'm wondering what you think about that, about innovation and about those kinds of things right now. When Coltrane made A Love Supreme, there were race riots going on. It was at the cusp of a world war, and there was a lot of those things going on. So I'm just curious if you think right now, what do you think about, the possibility of ingenuity and just kind of the survival of the jazz musicians?
Well, I think that could be, we'll know obviously when this is over. I mean, since people are quarantined, definitely the tech-savvy people have the biggest advantage of really the people who can spend a lot of time. The irony is there were a lot of people who were, starting to tour by themselves and use Ableton Live and all sorts of programs and technology to perform without kind of band members. And so the music was becoming less interactive. And there were a lot of things being lost in the transition. Now, a lot of these people, and I would assume they're the younger crowd, hopefully are, in their laboratories coming up with some really cool stuff right now because certainly they're well placed to do that. That's not my strong suit. I've always expanded more kind of horizontally across my instruments and adding, clarinets and flutes and other saxophones and all that to my repertoire. But I think certainly for myself, I've been honing in on, I've been really recording a lot of kind of a variety of compositional ideas, and you never know what's going to stick, and sometimes the stuff that comes out really quickly is powerful and lasting and stands the test of time, and sometimes the things you work really hard on don't last, and sometimes they do. It's hard to tell, but certainly it's hard because life is what inspires us, and we're certainly in New York. Everybody moves to New York specifically to go out. Like there's no real reason to deal with New York City unless you're able to go out all the time because we're living in these small apartments and everything's expensive and it's crowded and noisy and all this stuff. So the whole point is to go out. So we're losing a lot of that basic, the inspiration that comes from interaction with people and travel and museums and conversations and dogs and nature and, everything out there. But at the same time, I think, to me as an artist, it's always an opportunity everything's an opportunity, right? When you're broke, when you're rich, there's always a story to be told. If you have the need to express yourself, you're always going to be conveying something powerful from what you're experiencing. Like I said, I think the politics, we've all been dealing with things for years, whether it's income distribution or healthcare or racism or sexism or jazzism, the marketplace for jazz musicians, or even within the jazz community, kind of little infighting amongst different genres and things like that. So I think we're always faced with challenges and opportunities to reach in within ourselves and go beyond. Now, clearly some people, we've lost a tremendous number of musicians. I lost a friend and bandmate in Tony Allen yesterday, this great Afrobeat drummer from Fela's group, who I worked with a number of times over the years and just had developed a nice kind of social relationship with as well. And now he had a heart attack, so it wasn't based on necessarily related to virus, although some people are now thinking that some of these heart attacks are related to virus. But some of these losses, Henry Grimes and Lee Konitz and McCoy Tyner, and just there's so many people we've lost lately that it's you can't help but have a musical emotional reaction. And in a way, I always feel blessed as an artist to have that outlet, to be able to, have somewhere to turn to put out that energy. So, if you're in the middle of race riots, like you were talking about, you could see that as an inspiration, but you could also see that as an obstacle. It's a distraction, to have a lot of stuff going on. There's always different ways to look at this stuff that, and I've gone through moments of feeling really creative over the last 7 weeks, but I've had other moments where I really felt empty and like, oh my God, I need to play with some musicians again. I just can't do this by myself anymore. Why did I become a musician if I'm going to be alone in my room, if I don't feel the audience, if I don't feel, I think bass is the thing I miss the most, acoustic bass, just hearing those strings next to me. It's just like, God, I miss it so much. But hopefully everybody's producing, and, we might have a real wealth of stuff coming out over the next year. We'll see. Certainly, it's hard to know what is possible with that afterwards, how many chances we're going to have to present our ideas afterwards. But, we're not all Coltrane's, but we're certainly all, or Mingus's or whatever. We certainly are, even without this virus in this country politically, there's certainly been enough for all of us to be, extremely motivated about putting our positive energy and spiritual force behind our output, because it's the best part of them. The strange thing about the virus is probably that I think it's bringing out some of the best parts of America that have been a little bit dormant in hiding while the Orange Menace has been occupying the Pennsylvania Avenue, and I think in a weird way this has probably helped bring attention to the unity and love and goodness and creative spirit and caring and generosity and support that is kind of more typical of our better angels than what has been appealed to over the last several years, which has been certainly the opposite.
I totally agree. So I guess I want to know from you, when the music comes back live, what do you hope both musician and the audience realizes from this time away?
Well, there's, for me, the way I process this stuff, I'm an individual, and then I'm part of a whole variety of different communities, I'm part of the creative jazz community. I'm part of the broader jazz community. I'm part of the artistic community at large. I'm part of the Jewish, I'm secular, but Jewish. And then I'm part of, an American community, a global community, all this different stuff. And so I tend to look at these, it's shifting paradigms at any given moment. But myself, I feel the thing that hurt me personally at first had to do with the fact that, I'm in my 50s. I've been in the trenches now for a long time. I had a lot of early success in my career, and then kind of went through a period where I felt like I wasn't getting that much attention for some of my work. And I worked very hard last year, kind of biting the bullet, doing the non-musical stuff that you have to do to help with your career. And so I really got behind an album, this new album, Testament, that came out with Mark Rebo, Eric Rivas, and Chad Taylor. And it really got, as far as press and everything I could have hoped for, from, everything from New York Times to NPR and Rolling Stone, all sorts of things that just kind of came out and showed some appreciation and love for some of the work. And so for me, I had really put all this kind of, like planting a garden. So I was really planning for this year to be my harvest year and I had a couple different European tours coming up. I had a bunch of other gigs. And I just felt a nice buzz behind my work, which, it's not about celebrity. It's just that you often work as a jazz musician in the shadows and not feeling a connection between all the sacrifices you make and what you get back. And so I was finally just feeling like, oh, cool, this is really going to help now with the next period of time for me, because I'll build on this. This year I'll do these festivals in Europe. I'll travel. Got this killer band. They kick my ass every time I'm on stage. And it'll just be a huge growth year as far as performing. And suddenly this virus hits, and it's exactly the opposite. I'm kind of back to, I was almost self-quarantining last year to a certain extent to prepare for this year. And now, unfortunately, it's just continued. So for me personally, I'm just hoping that I can get back the buzz and some of the attention that my latest album got, and that people don't forget. Some of the festivals in Europe have already been very generous and said, listen, we can't do it this year, but we promise to have you back next year, and that's great. So what I can hope for myself and for everybody else is that, that the people who had momentum continue to have momentum. The people who are starting to get some momentum, don't lose it too much. And the people who are deserving of a little more, start getting some. And that the people just, clearly, I'm sure everybody's listening to so much music right now in quarantine, and it's almost like music is playing the role that being with people used to play for us. Music is really having to play this role of keeping us feeling connected, and it's such a social art form, and listening to it makes us feel sexy and social and alive and connected to everybody. Hopefully everybody's just going to really be hungry for that, that when we come out, they're going to want to feel, the spit from the horn and the power of the drums and the vibration from the bass, and just, be on the edge of their seats, wanting to experience this again. And, personally, I've felt this way for a while anyway, that we're coming back to that, an appreciation of what we do as an art form, and the raw power inherent to kind of live acoustic, especially improvised music. Imagine what people get to experience when you hear people create on the spot and take these chances in front of you and try to, reach down within themselves and connect to you while expressing themselves and willing to risk it in front of you to, it's a super generous and vulnerable thing to do that we've engaged in, and we work so hard to develop it so that when we get up on stage, we're respectful of that process and the magic that we try to harness. And I just really hope that when this stuff starts to lift a little bit and we get out there, it's like an army, we're all ready. We all got our weapons, and we're ready to go out there and spread the love and the spirit and provoke people again, bring people together, wake up some of the, dormant emotions that have been in there that people have had to hold back. It's going to be intense. But of course, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know, exactly how it's going to play out. If things are kind of, the floodgates will open, or if it's going to be kind of a trickle, or if it's going to be, really hard to get everybody in one room, or if we're going to be limited to outdoor shows for a while, or, I just don't know. It's hard to say, but I do know that we're all, we can't wait to do it again, and it's hard. It's like being sick for us. Even if we don't have the virus, it's like being sick. We're out of balance when we don't perform.
Yeah, without a doubt. Hey, man, thank you for taking some time out to talk with me on Jazz today. I really appreciate it. Stay safe and good luck with everything.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New Orleans, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Avram for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.